And here we are at the top of the hour. So welcome, everyone. I am Kelly Murray with the Consortium for Service Innovation and also the KCS Academy. Thank you for being here. We're going to just do a couple kind of housekeeping items before we get started. This is a KCS in Action web session. We do these about once a month in which we like to hear from people who are doing KCS in real life. And things that they have learned and approaches to their implementations. We host these the last week of the month. The next one will be Wednesday, May 29th. Zendesk is going to present on how they use Zendesk and Slack internally for knowledge sharing and collaboration. So I'll put links to that in the chat. And then on June 7th is the Friday, June 7th will be our next KCS Academy World Tour outside London. That's a one-day, it's sort of KCS in Action live, if you will. And Liz Bunger, who's here with us today to talk about KCS in Action at Paychex, did a presentation at the KCS Academy World Tour in San Francisco. And so we're very excited to have her here. When we heard her presentation at the World Tour in San Francisco, she mentioned that she'd been doing KCS for 12 years, and we also have 12 years. That just seems like a lot of KCS action. So we are anticipating lots of folks on the call, so everyone is muted. Please feel free to put comments in the chat, comments or questions in the chat, and I can monitor that. And then we're recording the call, so everybody who registered will get a link to the recording afterwards. So with that, I will turn it over to Liz.
All right. Thank you very much, Kelly. I'm really excited to be here. It was a great experience in San Francisco, and I'm thrilled to be able to share this information again. Kelly said my name is Liz Bunger. I work for Paychex. We have been doing KCS for about 12 years now. We rolled it out in our IT service desk, and I was an analyst on the service desk when we rolled out. So for all of you who have already rolled out or are working on rolling out, I was one of those people that said, I don't have time to do this. How can you make me do one more thing? That's the seat I was sitting in. It worked as basically our knowledge manager within our service desk for about 8 years. And we had KCS was going really pretty well for us within our service desk. We had a great implementation, and we had a number of other parts of the company that wanted to get involved as well. So we were working on influencing them. So that's really where my experience has been in that. Let me get into a little bit about what Paychex is, and I'll talk a little bit more about our roadmap. So Paychex, just to give you a little background on what we do, we are one of the leading providers of human capital management, basically doing payroll, human resources, anything that you need to take care of your employees. We have been in business for 45 years with 650,000 clients, and we are paying 1 in 12 employees out of the American private sector. So just to give you a little frame of reference of what our business model is like and how many clients we are servicing. Talk a little bit more about our path at Paychex. So in 2007, we rolled out KCS within our service desk. We actually went looking for a tool and realized pretty early on that we needed more than a tool, that we could implement a tool and we might be somewhat successful, but without some culture and some methodology behind it, we weren't probably going to be ultimately as successful as we need to be. Luckily, we happened upon KCS, and we rolled that out with our internal service desk. That was about 125 employees. Those 125 employees assist our 14,000 Paychex employees. I had about 215,000 contacts per year. At the time, we had about 72 different products. So that's where we started. We were able to grow that. So with KCS, using KCS and what we implemented for self-service, now when I say self-service, I'm only talking about internal self-service. So those 14,000 Paychex employees could go to a self-service knowledge base rather than contact our support desk. And we estimate that we saved the company about $4 million a year. I put that in here because the next few slides I'm going to tell you a lot of the things that didn't go so well. So I want to make sure that I put it out there that we really have had some great successes with KCS. In 2012, like I said, we had some of the other organizations that were raising their hands and saying, hey, me too, we want to get in on all this great success that you're seeing. So we would come in and train them. That would be my role. We'd go out, we'd talk about what KCS is, why they should do it, teach them how to use the tool we were using, and then stay in kind of a consultative role. They would come to us when they had questions. We would try and influence what they were doing, but there really wasn't any governance over our client service organization as a whole. They were left to really follow our suggestions as they wanted without that governance. This past year, I started in a new role at Paychex as the business program manager over the service organization. So we have gotten to the point now where we've realized that we need to do more with this in our client service organization. Those are servicing the 650,000 clients and 11 million employees, so there's a huge impact to that. We wanted to be more focused on knowledge, so now we've added my role, and that's what I'm doing, is rolling it out to about half the company to get them on board with KCS. And we have all of these lessons learned that I'm going to share with you guys that in those other implementations, we figured out things not to do. So what I'm really doing is not doing what we did last time and adding some new things. So talk about the lessons learned. First thing I'm going to tell you is there's nothing in here that I'm going to tell you that the practices guide doesn't already say. If the practices guide said don't do it and we did it, they were right. If they said do this and we decided not to, they were right. So that really is your roadmap, is following what that KCS practices guide suggests, both to do and what not to do. None of this is new and revolutionary. But I'll give you our little flavor or experience on this. First thing is making it easy. You want to make sure that your tool is easy for people to use, fix flag, and add knowledge. They shouldn't have to jump through hoops to do it. All of the folks on our team, your team, they have so much to do as it is that if it's not easy, they're not going to do it. Integrating it wherever they already are is a key piece. So they're going to use the tools that they're going to use. I don't think our company is much different than yours in that people find tools that they like. They find tools that they're comfortable with. Whatever you can do to integrate knowledge into what they are already using. For us, it's integrated in our CRM. It's integrated in our ITSM system. Integrating it with any other search engines will help drive people there. And the last piece with keeping it easy is don't be too bureaucratic. When there's too many rules, too many things that people have to remember in order to participate, it becomes too difficult, and they just throw up their hands and say, I'm not going to do it. It's really too hard for me to do. So that's the first thing that we really learned, is we need to make it easy, especially with that. Rather than forcing people to go to places that they aren't already going, what can we do to get it integrated where they already are? And if you have questions as we go through this, please feel free to throw them in the chat. Kelly will be monitoring that. Being mindful of reports. We do an excellent job with metrics and the things that we report on. And it's our management team is very focused on it, which is great. They need to be. It can be very easy to get hung up on the numbers, especially when it comes to measuring activities. So people want to know how many articles, how many times did people search, how many articles did they view, how many times did they link it to a case. The big thing with reporting is it's not that there's anything wrong with pulling those numbers together, but you would need to look at it in terms of what's the story that it tells. Rather than just putting numbers in front of people, because they'll tell themselves their own story, now we're trying to put numbers with a story that goes with it and making it much more holistic and getting multiple points. So again, the practices guide will tell you to look at the trends, not just on flat numbers. So I can say, you know, Kelly searched 50 times, Tara only searched 10 times. There may be a very good reason for that. We need to make sure that you're getting the story that goes with what those numbers are. We're trying very hard right now to focus our leadership team on the whole story. So how are they, you know, how much are they searching and viewing? And if we're attaching to cases, how often are they doing that? But then what's the impact of it also? Is it impacting their call stats? Looking at much more of a balanced scorecard than just straight numbers. If your reports focus on activities, they likely will drive bad behaviors. And I have seen that happen multiple times where we put reports in front of people with the best of intentions. And again, it says how many times people searched, how many times they attached articles to cases, how many times they viewed. And what ends up happening is when you're looking at those numbers in, say, a one-on-one, you sit down and the manager or supervisors may say, you know, Jennifer, I see that you have these are what your stats are. And regardless of what the manager meant to say, it could be construed differently from Jennifer when you're just looking at those numbers. So be careful what you're reporting on.
Liz, do you do any formal training with managers around how to have those conversations?
We just started doing some of that. So we were going to be adding more that is going to be specific around the reporting. What we've rolled out most recently for the leadership team specifically is just on the culture. So what kind of the things that we want the leadership to be talking about is the culture of knowledge sharing. That whole idea of, if you have a question, you should be looking in the knowledge base. Hey, you have some great information there. Are you sharing that in the knowledge base? That's where we're starting to focus them, is just on talking about the culture. And we are very cautious on what reports we put in front of them. We've kind of held back on some of those reports unless they are really pushing us. Because where I am with the service organization right now is we're really wrapping up wave one. So we decided this time we were going to do a waved approach. So we have about 7,000 employees, like I said, and we have about 20% of the organization that I would say is on board with KCS. Some of them are still following some of the old knowledge practices from those other rollouts that we did, but about 20% that is on board with KCS. So we're really focusing that leadership team on focusing on the culture.
And are there reports, so you're generating the reports that you're giving to those teams, and then are there reports that you find especially problematic or especially helpful?
The ones that I find most problematic is where it's knowledge information, just knowledge information. So it kind of has knowledge in a bubble, and it doesn't include things like what else is going on in the world. You know, whatever it is, if they're taking calls, how many calls are they taking? Because that's very related to how much are they using knowledge. You know, how many emails are they taking? Those kinds of things. If when we present knowledge as this is it, here's just a little piece, it just doesn't give enough of the picture.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Tying right into the reporting is really about watching your language. And that goes to when you talk about activities, then you're going to drive activities. And what we really want to drive is the outcome. So if you focus again on, you know, hey, Kelly, you created 5 articles, but I see that Ryan on your team created 10 articles. What Kelly hears you say is you need to create 5 more articles to match up to what other people are doing. Might not be what you meant to say. You might be even saying, hey, it's great that you created 5 articles, but here it is, a comparison like that, then it makes people feel like now I have to do more to measure up to what you're looking for. There might not have been as many opportunities, and that's okay. So again, watching where you're talking about those activities, what I'm really encouraging our folks to do now is talk more about why we're doing this. And I think that that's something that I have seen in the organizations that have rolled out in the past, that have had what I would have called at the time a pretty successful rollout, and then it fell away. It's that they stopped talking about why we're doing this. And now it's just about the activity. Now it's just about, I have to add knowledge, I have to use knowledge, I have to comment on it, whatever that piece is. And they get so focused on that because that's all they hear talked about, that they forget about why we're doing it. I have actually seen people have said, this was a total and complete waste of my time. Why are you making do this? Because they don't understand. So that's where they really want to focus on the culture. Why are we doing this? What's this driving towards? One of the big focuses with Paychex is, if this isn't getting us towards our goals, why are we doing it? And we can absolutely tie KCS into that. And KCS, we know, for all of you who have been doing this for any amount of time, knows can absolutely help you get to your goals. But we need to talk about that. We need to make sure that our knowledge workers are aware of why it's important for them to use knowledge even when they already know the answer. Why is it important for them to add knowledge when they think it's only going to be a one-off situation? So being very careful about how you're talking about it. And that's why we're really focusing the leader training on the culture, much more on the activities, so that we can get that piece really ingrained.
Are you using a strategic framework of any kind in terms of that sort of, you know, I think the practices guide talks through how to build one around what your corporate, what your company level goals are and how KCS meets them and what kind of measures you might look at in terms of that progress.
I'm going to say yes, we are. We have not pulled it together as formally as we could, but we absolutely have pulled together those pieces. So talking about our goals, we definitely have it tied to all of our goals for what we've tied it to the company goals, we've tied it to the organization goals so that they have that piece. The measures are still one of the pieces that we're really working on. How do we tell that story through the knowledge measurements that go along with everything else so that we can tie it back?
And are you at a point yet where you can, or where you're designing or planning or able to give knowledge workers visibility to their impact, sort of in the grand scheme of things?
With the organization that I'm rolling out with now, I would say we're not there yet. With our service desk organization, yes, we absolutely have gotten there. We've been there and are able to show the impact even on things like problem management efforts. We've done some tremendous things on the service desk with article usage and being able to find the root cause of issues and mitigate those or make them so that, the self-service, whatever it is, that we no longer have to answer those issues. And then we'll turn that back to the service desk so that they're aware of that kind of impact that it has of using knowledge. So yes, in the organization that is much more advanced, we are doing that.
Yeah. Those two things seem to really go hand in hand in terms of sustaining a KCS implementation, right? The leading with why and then providing people visibility to the fact that it's working are easy. They're sometimes hard to communicate and therefore easy to sort of skip, but I think they're critical in terms of sustaining engagement.
Agreed. And we were very lucky early on when we rolled out with our service desk that we saw some pretty significant immediate success. That's before we rolled out the internal self-service piece where they could really see what difference it was making because we were able to carve out 10 more headcount to realign to other efforts. So that's very visible to see, hey, all this effort that you're doing with knowledge, now we have a team that is focused on problem management. What we have to do is 12 years later, make sure that they still see that you can have that kind of impact, even if it's not, we're carving out a whole new team, but now what are we doing about it? This problem management team, what efforts are they doing to make your life better? So those calls that you can't stand answering, what are we doing to get rid of those?
Nice.
Don't even think about adopting autopilot. We definitely had organizations that fell into this because they felt like KCS was a project. We're going to roll out KCS. Let's say we're going to give it 6-9 months. We'll get it in place. We're going to have the culture in place, and it's just going to run on its own. No, it's not. It will always need care and feeding. Somebody needs to continue to drive the culture within the organization and make sure that people are aware of it. So even 12 years later in our service desk organization, pardon me, there's someone who's functioning as the knowledge manager that keeps the culture going within the organization. They still have coaches. We're still talking about KCS and why it's important and what it means to them and the different pieces that they have to do. You might get past that project phase. You will get past that project phase of implementing it, but now it becomes a program. KCS is part of how we do business. It's what the program needs attention. Don't ding people for things that really don't matter. My favorite one is always spelling. We like to tell people that they made spelling mistakes. We like to tell them they made grammar mistakes. But you probably have seen those memes, whether it's on Facebook or somewhere else, where all the words are spelled wrong and you can still read it. It doesn't matter. Now, I'm not saying that spelling and grammar don't matter, but it doesn't really impact the usefulness of an article. And when you go to someone, even if it's once, certainly if it's multiple times, and say, hey, you had a spelling error, you spelled this word wrong, you spelled this word wrong. Number one, they feel stupid, and nobody wants to feel stupid. So certainly don't want to do it again. And those are just little like paper cuts that get to people, and they say, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. It could be that they feel like it's too hard, or like I said, they don't want to be told that they're stupid again, even if you didn't actually say it. On our article quality index, I absolutely refuse to let anybody put anything on there about spelling and grammar. What I've told our coaches is when you are reviewing articles, if you find articles that are spelled incorrectly, fix it and move on. You don't even need to tell someone that they have made spelling errors. Now, if we have someone who seriously just can't write, then maybe we move them more to a reader, and that's okay. You can have those conversations, but for the most part, that doesn't really happen. It's a couple of spelling mistakes here or there. Just go and fix it and move on, because people will stop participating. They will stop creating knowledge, and we don't want that to happen.
Are your articles viewable externally?
They are not viewable externally at this time.
I was just wondering if there was a conversation that happened with marketing or anybody else about this particular topic.
I will, yes, and I will say, so again, the impact is less because we're talking internally. I am sure when we get to the point, well, here's the thing with them being viewed externally anyway, they're going to will have gone through more of a review. So that whole reuse is review, by the time we get to the point where we're publishing it externally, we should have had enough of a review that those spelling errors are no longer an issue, and it'll go through a publisher review so that we can clear up any of those types of things. I know we absolutely will have one final review before they get published externally, I'm sure. It's not just a tool. The culture is the most important thing, and I think that this is something that when people think about knowledge who have not been involved in it before, they think that they need a new knowledge management tool. And I will tell you that finding a tool is the easy thing. I'm not going to say it's easy. It's the easier part of it. There are a lot of great tools out on the market that can do exactly what you need them to do. So being able to find a tool and implement a tool is really the easier part. Changing a culture is the most important piece and a much more difficult piece, because you really have to change the way people are doing their jobs. That's a critical piece. You're changing the way people are doing their jobs. When I do any type of training, I spend as little time as possible talking about the tool. When you go looking for a tool, you want it to be something that's intuitive, that people are comfortable using, that they know how to use, that requires minimal training. And then you can focus your time on the culture of why we're doing this, how you get it into your workflow, and how you can impact the organization. You cannot minimize that focus on the culture.
One question going back to the sort of the previous topic. So how will you scale that publisher review of articles before they get published externally? Will every external article get reviewed?
I don't know yet. I think that, will they get reviewed? I'm not sure what that's going to look like. In terms of what I would propose, I think that the review should be minimal. Would it be all of them? I'd be surprised if we wouldn't have to have some final review over every article. But again, I would like it to be very minimal, that we're looking for something that can move the process along quickly to get them published externally. I think our biggest piece is going to be when we get there, having probably a pretty big chunk of articles that we want to move over.
Mm-hmm. And who in the organization is encouraging that, in terms of having to have another set of eyes on it before it gets published externally?
I think our marketing department will probably drive a lot of that.
Well, you should make them do the reviews.
We could do that. What I'd like to do, this is how it works in my head, which I will say, quite frankly, that things work very easily in my head and don't always work that well in reality, and I'm very well aware of that. But I would like to get to the point where we have, let's pretend it's our marketing team. I'm not even positive that will be the team most concerned, but let's pretend it is. That we can build enough trust in that organization that the KCS process works, that we can put publishers in place across multiple organizations that can fall in line with what the expectations are of the marketing department and still fall in line with the KCS practices, so that we can get those published more quickly.
Yeah. Has there been any conversation about, this has actually been reused X number of times, and therefore, because reuse is review and we have an appropriate number of publishers, it really actually should just get published externally?
Yes, absolutely. That will be exactly where we are.
Yeah. How far How far down how far away is publishing externally? Do you know?
Well, I guess, again, in my head, we're starting to have some of those conversations now, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I've got a meeting next week that hopefully I will have a better idea, but I'm hoping it will be sooner rather than later.
And then one more question from the chat. What will people look for in that review? Just copy edit issues, or?
Some of it, I really think, because of the business that we're in, is going to be a compliance review also. So we definitely, because of the products that we have, because of the advice that we might be giving in those articles, we'll have to make sure that there's some type of compliance review over it as well.
Great.
Don't think too small. This is something that we did completely unintentionally, but we needed a knowledge base within our IT service desk, and so we went looking for something to suit our needs. And then we created it to suit our needs, and it was very IT focused. We actually had, when we rolled out the internal self-service piece, we called it Ask IT, because that's what it was about, Ask IT. And then as we tried to scale it, so 2008, we rolled out that piece. In 2012, now we're bringing in some of our business units. They're going to use the same tool, and we had to do things like change our taxonomies. We wanted to rebrand our internal self-service portal, so that it wasn't just about Ask IT. Now it could be about we're getting any type of information. And I will say, so we probably have been working on that rebranding for about 4 years, and it still hasn't really stuck well. So when you first look at implementing KCS, when you first look at even the tool, think about how can this scale to the entire enterprise? How can this scale to the entire company so that you can bring in groups like HR, you can bring in finance, marketing, your business units, whatever it is, think about them also so that you don't have to do any type of rework. I see there's another question in the chat too. Do you concern writers with tone of voice, terminology, consistency, things beyond correctness? In today's world, we don't. We're really focused on, especially when you talk about terminology, we're focused on the context of the customer. That is something that we have always struggled with. And I think part of it is the audience we were writing internally, and it's human nature at least for us, and I can't imagine that it's just us, that somebody calls up and asks a question and we think of how we wish they asked the question. So we're using the correct terminology and they're using something different. So we are absolutely focused on the context of the customer. Even when we get to the point of external facing knowledge, that's something that I'm really going to drive, is having that context, because it doesn't matter if I have it written the correct way. If that's not how they're searching, then they can't find it. So making sure that we have that, especially when it comes to the terminology, the consistency, we have that with our templates. So having consistent templates makes the formatting easier. We have a great content standard. So that's really where it helps us provide the consistency, making sure that, we're being careful how we're referencing the audience. Those pieces are all covered in our content standard. And next question is the intent to have everybody in the company participate in the solve loop, or would there be other KM approaches in play? When it comes to our service organization, is the organization that I am currently responsible for. So we have about 14,000 employees. That's 7,000 of them. Everyone in the service organization, my expectation is they will be involved in the solve loop. I would love to see us at some point scale this to the rest of the company. So I've got the 7,000 people. We already have some folks in our service desk that are doing the same thing. I would love to ultimately see us scale this to the whole company. I think we need to see those really great successes in the service organization, so that we can roll that out to other groups and say, hey, look what we've done and how we've scaled it to such a large group and all the benefits that you can see. That's the same idea with what we did with our service desk is, here's all the benefits, don't you want these too? Can you explain the content standard? Yes, content standard really walks through the expectations for creating knowledge articles. So with the content standard, we have in ours, first piece that we talk about in our content standard is all about the context. getting that piece in place so that people can understand it. We go through the anatomy of a knowledge article and how to use the different fields and what the expectations. In most content standards, ours doesn't have these, but even having examples of good articles, bad articles, having a style guide, and this is available to everybody who's creating knowledge. So our candidates, our contributors, we don't have a publisher role right now, but everybody has access to our content standard. We've got the full one is about 5 pages, and then we have a 1-page reference as well. And it's a tool to drive consistency within the knowledge articles and make it easy for people to be able to create them. Okay. And my last lesson learned that I have today is around the coaches. The coaches really are critical to the success. And I don't mean that just when you roll out a KCS program, you need to have great coaches in place. You need to keep coaches in place. We had one organization when they rolled out, they had coaches, they were doing really, really well. A couple of coaches left, they didn't replace the coaches, and we saw their program really start to slip because they didn't have someone who was helping to drive the culture. That's really what you want your coaches to be doing, is driving the culture on the front line. They are sitting with your folks, they are peers, they know day to day the ins and outs of the job. They can really help drive why should we be using knowledge? How does it benefit me as a knowledge worker? And the coaches know the same job, they're doing the same job, so they can share that information. You have to give them time to commit to the KCS activities. This is actually something that I went as far up as our executive team and said, we want to put coaches in place. I need them to have dedicated time, and I need you to commit to giving them that time. You know, these are the benefits that we expect to get from it, and I was able to get that commitment from the executive team for time for coaches. One of the other things with coaches is they're not just auditing the articles, and this was something, so we did our first wave in the service organization in November, and we had a number of lessons learned. And one of them was around the coach community. We didn't give them enough tools because it felt like they were just supposed to do audits, and if nobody's creating articles now, what do they audit? We've since come up with what we're referring to as a candidate checklist that the coach can print it off or pull it up electronically and sit down with their candidates to walk them through what is it that I do. And one of the first things on the list is open up the knowledge base when you come in the morning so that you can, becomes habit that you just start to use knowledge because it's open, it's there. Someone asks me a question, whether it's a client or a peer, and I go there first. So giving the tools, the coach program is probably one of the things that I'm very passionate about with that rollout, is making sure that the coaches have all the tools that they need so that they can be successful as coaches and they can build that success with their candidates and get them built up to contributors and really keep that culture piece going. Our coach ratio, we have it set up now. Most of our teams are 1 coach for every 8 to 10 employees. We have had some teams that have been able to go to 1 coach for 5 employees. We only had 1 team that did that, but I will say that what I'm seeing right now is that's probably one of our most successful teams. We do expect, as we get further down past this adoption phase, that we will move to a probably more coaches or more candidates per coach, but I don't know that we're going to get to the point. I think one of the recommendations that I saw, I think it's in the practices guide, is you could long-term, you could even get to 1 coach for 50. And maybe we get there, but I think my feeling is around the culture that you're always going to have new employees coming in. You're going to have new leadership coming in, making sure you have somebody who can really keep that culture going. Ours is basically built so that it's pretty much 1 coach for each supervisor team. Now, our supervisors typically have 8 to 12 employees, so that works out really well for us to be able to keep the 1 coach for each supervisor team.
And those coaches sit on those teams as well.
They do.
Yeah.
I say that they do for the most part. I actually have 1 team that is going cross products, but it's still knowledge workers. It's still frontline folks. I had one team that wanted to put supervisors as coaches, and I strongly discouraged them to do that, from doing that, because the thing is the supervisors and managers already play a role in this. And the coaches need to have somebody that they can go to. So the coach is kind of like, I want to call them their culture buddy when it comes to knowledge, that they're going to be much more encouraging. And if there's things that need to be corrective, that's where the supervisor should be able to come in. So being able to separate those roles, I think, makes a big difference. Next question was, did all your coaches receive KCS certification and or coach training? I wish they had all received KCS certification. I would love to be able to do that, but we have hundreds of coaches, so that's not something that we have been able to do. We've created our own internal training based on a lot of the stuff in the practices guide. Our learning and development team, our training team, created modules for us, and our coach program is definitely the most advanced. They really go through all of the modules. So they start out with what KCS is, why it's important, then we get into, the different roles and how to do the tasks that go with it, because they need to know that piece. And then we focus also on the culture and how to have conversations, how to give feedback. One of the other pieces that we're doing is I am doing coach office hours, and I know some of our individual organizations are doing those also, but once a week. We have so many coaches now, I've actually upped it to 2 sessions that I do, and the coaches can just show up. It's an hour. They ask questions. They can learn from each other. Some of the questions I'm getting is, how do I have conversations with people about this? Some of it is, how do I do this in the tool? And we'll cover any type of questions. If I have questions emailed to me or IM to me throughout the week, then I make sure I cover those as well. Also making sure that I'm putting this stuff in the knowledge base, so that when they have those types of, especially if it's how do I do something in the system, getting those into knowledge, but then I cover them during those coach office hours. And I'm doing them because I want the coaches to feel like they have every tool possible to be successful, so that they can ask questions. So the way we have it set up within our service organization is I function as the business program manager, really overseeing the whole knowledge program. And then I have folks in the organization that are the program team members. They're the ones who have spent a lot more time learning about KCS, and they're really driving the culture. They work with the management team to find the right coaches, and then we have the rest of the licensing model that goes with it.
So a question from Sean, do you make the reporting available through the coaches, and does this work to ensure the story is tied to the metrics?
The coaches and the leadership team both have access to all of the reporting. That is something that I have had, what has come up probably every couple of weeks. I bring it up on the coach call, because the way we are presenting it right now, quite frankly, is not ideal. It's numbers functioning in a bubble, which is not where we want to be. We're working on improving our reporting. So I'm having those conversations with our coaches, and we'll be having them soon also with the leadership team about what I want them to do with the metrics. Because we are so metrics driven, lots of times even the coaches want to pull those numbers out and sit down and present them to someone, to which I have said, please don't do that. What I want you to do is, I want you to review the numbers before you go into a coaching session. I want you to figure out what story you think it's telling you, and then have that conversation with someone to find out what story it really is telling. So our coaches have access to the numbers. I do not want them sitting down and presenting numbers to anybody.
Are there scheduled coaching meetings between the coach and writer or knowledge worker, or only a coach reaches out when they want to correct behavior?
I'm going to say it varies by team. Some of them are scheduled. Some of them are, because a lot of our folks are on the phones as well. So some of it is, hey, the queues are really quiet now. Let's sit down and do some additional coaching. Some of it is going to be based on when articles are written. Because we are relatively new with a lot of the organizations, we don't have as many people writing articles right now. The other thing is, when we rolled out within our service organization, because we've been doing this 12 years, we rolled out, we had 50,000 articles already. that they were using. So a lot of articles don't need to be created that are new. There's still plenty that do. So it's not so much around the review of the articles as it is sitting with them and showing them how they could incorporate knowledge into what they're doing.
You mentioned earlier to lead with the why, then follow up with results. How did you implement this?
So the biggest thing with leading with the why in terms of implementing it is that's where we focus all of our training. So our training, I say all of it, I'm going to say most of it, at least 75, 80% of it is focused around why are we doing this and why is it important and why it can make this a better experience for you as an employee, a better experience for our leaders, and a better experience for our clients. So in terms of how do we implement it, we just focus on it. That's where we focus on it. And then we can tie it to things like our Net Promoter Score. We can tie it to employee satisfaction. You know, there's a number of different items. I think those are probably a couple of the big ones that'll resonate, especially with our knowledge workers. You know, to say that we increased our first contact resolution, that might impact some of our knowledge workers, but for some of them, to them, that's just a number. So it really is tying it to why is it important to them, and then being able to follow up with that. So as we have successes saying, we were able to do this because of knowledge, our clients are happier. I just got a great success story this morning, and that's something else that we're doing is really sharing those success stories. I got a great one this morning from someone that was saying that they took a Q call and person asked them a question that they knew nothing about. And she said, sure enough, she looked it up in knowledge and it was right there. And she was so excited about it. So just being able to share that excitement, because that's a lot of the results we see, is that increased confidence, that excitement about I could find the answer right there at my fingertips. So we are sharing those out as they happen so that, you know, other people can see where we're seeing that success.
And I think an excellent lead in to this question, which is, do the metrics that you capture and track correlate to the business drivers that management is tracking, like CSAT, customer reference score, NPS?
Yes. Yeah, so ultimately that is absolutely where we will be, is being able to tie it to those types of things. You know, seeing that our NPS is going up, that our employee satisfaction is going up, because we do employee satisfaction surveys, that our client retention, our employee retention, all of those things should move in the right directions because we're doing this. So absolutely, we'll be tying that. We did that in our service desk also, because we do internal surveys, you know, how happy are you with the service from the service desk? And we could see with those that it drove the right results. People were happier with the service that we were providing. So yes, we've done that in the past, and we'll absolutely be tying that again, because again, that goes back to really kind of the pieces of the strategic framework. We are doing this because it's important to our business goals. And one of our business goals is making sure that our clients are happy. So we want to be able to tie it to those pieces.
And at some point, Sean added to his question and said, at the article level, but I don't know quite where that fit in.
So the only thing I could think, like at the article level, I think that might be more to being able to solve things, root cause, being able to eliminate workarounds or eliminate bugs in the system, whatever it is. So to that extent, we could track it. Let's say we have an article that's used 100 times per week. Then once that issue is solved because we reused it through knowledge, and now it bumped up in the priority, then we could go back and say, you know, we're going to get some more satisfaction just because of that. It'd be tougher to correlate it to a number. But at the article level, I would say we do some of that just through root cause. And we have within our IT service desk, we've actually gotten to the point where our problem management efforts trigger off of article usage. So the more articles are used, the more it will bubble up and we'll automatically open a problem effort so that we can start researching those.
Two juicy questions here. I just want to make sure we got through all of your slides.
We did?
Okay, perfect.
There we go. We did.
So the first one is, what functions or departments are responsible for the KCS strategy and program versus the technology platforms that you're using to deliver employee self-service?
So the KCS functions and departments responsible for the strategy at KCS, that's me, and the program. So within our service desk, it truly is, I'm the only person who has the responsibility full-time in the company. Within our IT service desk, even when I was functioning as the knowledge manager, that was only half of my job with driving the culture within that organization. So for our service organization, it truly is just me driving that. And then I have people who also have full-time jobs, like I said, the program team, that they are driving that piece within their organization. I do also have the luxury of, within the team that I work on, we have a whole team of folks that do business intelligence and analytics, so I can leverage them as resources. So we don't have to have a dedicated resource to do some of those pieces. We just tap into those. I also have business analysts that can assist. I don't have anybody that works on knowledge full-time, but I do have some other folks that can assist part-time with things that I need assistance with. In terms of the technology lives in IT. They manage all of that, and any enhancements or anything we need with it, we work with that organization on the technology. So we don't manage the technology piece.
Okay. Earlier you said you had no publisher role and have two roles. Is it candidate and contributor? And what does each role do? Is it what's recommended in the practices guide or something different?
It's exactly what's recommended in the practices guide. So I am trying very hard this time to not deviate from the practices guide as much as possible. I'll tell you, it's not easy to do, because sometimes we think, oh, we're just going to tweak it just a little bit, but we've tweaked it in the past and it hasn't worked so well. So our candidates can create articles in a draft status, they can flag articles, and they can use articles. Our contributors can use, flag, fix, add knowledge. They can finish articles that other people have created and move them to a published state. And then the other role that we have is the coach role, which again falls right in line. So the program team pulled together the competencies, the expectations for each role. Basically what we did is we went to the practices guide. We took exactly what the practices guide recommends and made any small tweaks that we needed to within our organization to fit, if there was something else that we kind of need to Paychexize it a little bit. But there weren't a whole lot of changes that we made, but we started with exactly what was in the practices guide. I can't speak highly enough of the practices guide. Before we run out of time and I don't get a chance to, anytime I have a question on how do I do this, what should we be doing, I start with the practices guide. I go there first and I look up whatever question that I have, it's organized well, and I start with those recommendations.
Excellent. I love to know someone's using it.
I do. I use it a ton, Kelly. I really do. I'd be lost without that.
And then what tools do you use for knowledge management, case management, search, and collaboration, if applicable?
Yeah, so knowledge management, our knowledge tool that we use is Right Answers. For our case management, we use Salesforce. We use ServiceNow for IT service management. Our knowledge tool, Right Answers, is integrated with all of those. For calls, we're also using Upstream. We are working on an integration with that. We use SharePoint. We integrate our knowledge base with that. And I think that those are really the big tools that we're using. I shouldn't say that. We also use Confluence, and we are working on finishing up the integration with Confluence.
And you had mentioned earlier about sort of going to where people are right? I think that was on one of your first slides in terms of, and so is that something that how did that work in terms of, I mean, that's quite a handful of tools, and at some point you weren't on some of those.
Correct.
And so how'd you manage that sort of transition?
We started with the big ones, because we rolled out in IT on the service desk, we had to go with the IT service management tool first.
Mm-hmm.
At the time we were on HP, so we integrated with that tool, and we just knew that's where we needed to be. As the customer service organization came on, they were using Salesforce. We knew we needed to integrate with that. Some of the other ones, like Confluence, our development partners use that primarily. So we have been working on figuring out how we can get integrated in it because it functions a little bit different. It's a wiki, but there's still, even when we don't have an integration, there are still, like with our knowledge articles, they will reference each other back and forth. So we ultimately, for me, we want one source of truth. Because we all know we struggle with updating things in one place. We're not going to update them in more than one. at least having them so that, like, if something in Confluence could link to a knowledge article, so it still has just one source of truth. Same thing with SharePoint. We link between the two regularly.
Whose responsibility is it to address flagged articles?
We have, the authors are really responsible, but they don't always have the rights to do it, so they work with their coaches on it. So we want the feedback to go back to the author. They can work with their coach, and as we develop more contributors, then they'll be working with the contributors to help with the flags.
And do you have a knowledge domain expert role?
Very soon. And there was a great presentation at the Member Summit in Maine that I was thrilled. I took a ton of notes, and that is something that is on my short list, I'm going to say within the next 6 months, to have it rolled out more extensively within the next 2 months. I have one organization, possibly two, that I'm going to pilot it with. That's one thing that I really want to do is pilot it. I don't want to try and go at it full steam with everybody because our organizations are really broken down by product areas. I'll start with, so that'll be our domain. I'll start with one. Let's see how we do, what our lessons learned are. I'm really excited about that. That's something we haven't effectively done. We only dabbled with it in the past. So I'm really excited to roll out that knowledge domain expert role.
Do you have people identified in terms of who those might be?
I have one guy that keeps asking me because I mention it periodically. So I've got one person in one of the groups that keeps saying, when are you going to do that? When are you going to do that? So I'm thinking he's going to be a good candidate. He's pretty excited about it. Otherwise, I'll work with the program team because it's a different skill set. We need to make sure that they have the product knowledge, that they are good communicators, that they can really help improve that domain of knowledge. So we need to make sure we have the right skill set.
It's funny how often we hear about KDEs just sort of appearing, right? Like, well, I was just tinkering in the knowledge base. I figured this thing out or whatever in terms of trends and patterns.
Yes, and I think we'll see some of that too.
Yeah. Okay, who manages knowledge and article lifecycle? Which might be, and if this question is not related to archiving, I'd like to tag on to, do you have an archiving strategy?
So this will be going to the knowledge domain expert role. In terms of do we have an archiving strategy, I think we have a couple. For the organization that I am overseeing, our archiving strategy is really going to fall to the knowledge domain experts. So it'll be based on relevance. You know, when we finish our upgrade to Windows 10, then we're going to archive all of the Windows 7 articles. Otherwise, I do not intend to archive articles just because they're old or because they have not been used. I know we have some organizations that have done that in the past, but that's something that I do not plan to move forward with.
Two more questions. How do you create self-service articles?
For us, it's just a collection within our tool that makes it easy. It's all about who the article is visible to. So we just pick a different audience, and then it's visible to self-service articles so that we can share the one. Again, for us, self-service is all internal.
And do you have a need to translate articles?
We do not. So we do have an advantage there over some of the companies that are global. We do not have to translate our articles. So we don't have to worry about any of the language barriers that might exist.
That's nice, because that gets complicated real quickly.
It does. And I know when we were talking about this in San Francisco, when I was talking about don't ding people for spelling and grammar, there were some questions that came up about, do we have folks that English is not their primary language? And we do. We have a team of folks in India, and this has actually been an issue. When I was talking to one of our folks in our service desk, and he had said that they don't want to create articles because they feel like that they've made spelling mistakes and people have called them out on it. So now they don't want to create articles. And I think that there can be an issue with the language barrier. I think we need to figure out how to make it work, because I wouldn't want to have a whole team of people that have decided that they aren't going to share anything when they could have a ton of great information to share.
Do you use how-tos, FAQ, QA templates? Do you like, uh, or put another way, how many templates do people have access to in terms of creating knowledge?
We have three primary templates. We have a how-to, we have an error, and we have a problem. Those are the ones that get used most often. We have created some templates for specific teams. We're trying to tone that down a little bit. Within Right Answers, within the tool that we use, we do have the ability to hide some fields. So when teams have a need for that, then we have to create specific templates for them as well. It can be a great tool to be able to use. We just want to make sure that we don't overdo it. So yeah, three primary templates that we're using.
And do they get used fairly, is the usage fairly spread out between the three of them, or is there a primary that people...
How-to.
Yeah, interesting.
How-to is primarily what it is. And it's funny, when we first rolled out, there was a big feeling of this is knowledge, this is not training, and I'm not going to put things in there that are how-to that people should know how to do automatically. Or they should have known from their training, which my feeling is they don't. They asked you a question. Do you want to answer that question again? If you don't, let's get it in the knowledge base. It doesn't matter if that concept of they should have known, especially with, our companies out there now are just, we have complex environments. We're to the point now that we have over 80 products that we offer to our clients, which is amazing. But nobody can know the ins and outs or even highlights necessarily of all of that. So being able to get information out there that is quick and easy for people to be able to get at their fingertips without having to go back through a training that they took place.
And do you use categories for your templates?
So I'm not sure what you mean by categories. I don't know about the categories. If you want to type a little more information on that, I can tell you about the KCS Council. We do have a KCS Council that was started by our service desk, and we added people. Originally, we had some of the technology people that were managing pieces of it. Now the technology all sits in that organization. We have representation from pretty much all of the organizations that are using the knowledge base and that are involved in knowledge, and that KCS Council was meeting once a month and now meets once every other month. But that's run by really the folks who run the technology.
Are there coaches that get to come sit on the KCS Council, or?
We don't now. And even, we kind of have like a sub KCS Council with a program team within service. Some of those we have some coaches on. But yes, typically it is whoever is kind of part of the program team, and they'll relay the information to the coaches. Product categories, subcategories to help find articles. So we use taxonomies. It's probably the same thing that you are talking about with the categories. So we can categorize them by product, sub-product, those kinds of things. We go up to, I think the tool will allow us to go 5 levels deep. We typically don't go any further than 3, but that is a filter that folks can use to narrow down the information that they found.
Excellent. We are so close to the top of the hour. Any other last questions from anybody while we have these 2 minutes? How is knowledge kept relevant and up to date?
Reuse.
Reuse is review.
Reuse, yes. Reuse. Yeah, absolutely. Reuse is review. That whole idea that there is no, and I'll tell you, I heard it for years. People didn't want to use the knowledge base because it was outdated. It was irrelevant. What they needed wasn't there, to which now I go out and I say that's, I don't say it like this, but that's basically on you. It is not my knowledge base. I don't own the knowledge base. Everybody owns the knowledge base. And if you find something that is not relevant, it's out of date, links don't work, you own, whether it's updating it, if you have the ability, great. You own minimally flagging it so that somebody else can fix it. You're not allowed to, I say not allowed, you can't say that there's garbage in the knowledge base if you're not improving it.
And do you have to go through recreating the article structure? I might need more context for that.
So if we can get more context around that, I see also users don't want to own articles. We have seen that. People don't want to be the ones who are the authors of it because they feel like then they own it. That's where the coach comes into play too. And I think that that's where the knowledge domain expert can come in, so that while somebody might be assigned as an author, it's really everybody's responsibility. It's just because they are the author doesn't mean they're the one solely responsible for that. Their coach can assist with them. And when we get to the knowledge domain expert, they can help with that piece too.
Yeah, the other thing we see there, right, is it's not, if you author an article, that doesn't mean you are responsible for updating it. It's the people who are searching and interacting with that article. In the moment of interaction, you own the article you're looking at, right?
Right, exactly. Gamification strategies might be used to drive adoption. So we do love gamification. We do love to do a lot of contests, and we have done some great contests in the past that have had some great success, and we've done some contests in the past that have driven the wrong behavior. So if you are thinking about gamification, I would say do it, try it, see what you can find, make sure it's well-rounded. One of the easiest ones that I've seen groups do and that they love to do is who can create the most articles. And that is a really quick way to populate your knowledge base with garbage. So just be really careful. I would say we've had ones where it's they have done point systems around using flagging, fixing, adding, where people get points for all those types of activities and split them up in teams. That is less likely to drive end up with having garbage in your knowledge base.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. It has been a pleasure to spend some time with you today. Thank you so much to Liz. We will be with you again next month at the KCS in Action call with Zendesk and Slack. And otherwise, have a great week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.